Well, once they found Bucky, Buck. Once they found Butler's Buck. He's got poop.
I hope he's quiet.
He didn't mute. Good luck. I got a new TV, so now I can play for Britain West in all of its glory. 65 inches.
You got to be careful, like with the size. There's like a whole science behind it, apparently.
I miss old Campesino.
You better. You probably just have crappy Floridian Mexican now. What are we doing?
See, Dad. Hello, welcome to Showboys. We're here. March Madness has wrapped. Nick, if we jump into our time machine, by the time this episode has released, March Madness will have just concluded and a grand champion was crowned. And boy, what a game it was that won. Totally deserved it, right?
Yep.
What'd she say?
What a match. What a battle.
So spicy.
Battle for the ages. All the Final Four are just fantastic. Can't believe any of those lost.
We're going to, pick up where we left off before March Madness. We're going to talk about Masters of the Air. The last episode before March Madness started, we did a mid-series review. I think we reviewed through episode 5, and the show has now since concluded. We love the show, so we have to now talk about the show in its entirety. And also, they released what I'm calling a companion documentary called The Bloody 100th that, gives a behind-the-scenes look at the inspiration of the show, and it was fascinating, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit too, but before we get into it, Nick, how you doing tonight, dude?
I'm doing good. Outside of the sparing 2 appearances in March for March Madness, I've been largely off the radar. It's been pretty wild. A whole different world. Might as well be on a different planet. How are you?
Not bad. Oh, and we got to, of course, shout out our top tier patrons.
Shout out.
Tim B, East H, Josie. Thank you guys so much. Your support means the world. If you're wondering what Patreon is or what we offer on our Patreon, head to patreon.com/showboyspodcast. Check it out. Sign up today if you would be so kind as to help financially support us. That would be amazing.
For as little as $3, you can get access to March's exclusive episode, which was our failure to launch War Tales co-op playthrough. Got an awesome episode 1 out. I rewatched that today. It's really good. It's really funny.
Biscuit.
Rickard and Nichard. Oof. We had a lot of fun with that. I can't believe we only did like an episode. It just went nowhere.
Yeah, we need to get back to that because it was fun to record, and then Jeff did a great job throwing the episode together.
The big crit energy.
Yeah.
Got me every time. I forgot life was that cool.
Yeah, so exclusive episodes, early access to episodes, all that fun stuff over on Patreon. Go check it out. First things first, Nick, how did you feel about the series as a whole, Masters of the Air?
As a whole, I think it was freaking awesome. Absolutely loved it. And we've talked about in part 1, just like so many details about what makes this show as awesome as it is, right? Just that aerial combat is just off the charts. I feel like it sped up a little bit there, like in the second half here. But ultimately, like once you get to the end of a series like this, and especially when they do the tie back to like the real people that it's based on, it's all just so worth it. They did a really good job. And obviously our boy Austin Butler, one of the trendiest young actors there is right now. He's just kind of all over the place after Elvis, then Dune part 2. And I love your comment about how, and I totally agree, we totally thought he was doing a really good caricature of this of this person he's playing in Masters of the Air, but no, it's actually just Austin Butler's
that's just how he talks.
Elvis voice.
Well, I'd like to say how happy we are to be down here. It's a real honor for us to get a chance to appear on Louisiana Hayride.
Yeah. And they actually made fun of it on SNL. He hosted sometime in March, and I saw the clip where his opening monologue, he was like, everyone says after Elvis my voice got deeper and more Elvis-y. I just don't think that's true. Here's a clip from 10 years ago. I don't sound any different. And they just pitched his voice like super high.
I'm really excited. It's been a great experience so far.
I thought that was funny. So clearly it's a thing.
You're right. Yeah, we were totally both sold on not just his character, Bucky, but all of the characters kind of being caricatures of soldiers from the greatest generation, right? I think what might be the best approach to tonight, since we're going to talk about the last half of Masters of the Air, but also the documentary, The Bloody 100th, I think instead of talking about it as two separate things and having like their own time, I feel like it's only appropriate to intermingle Bloody 100th commentary while we're going through the last half of this series.
You know, it being the docu-series that is, you know, narrated by the actual interviews from the characters themselves, like the real life versions of them.
All the characters seemed, you know, that larger than life, like Old Boy, Greatest Generation, Soldier. But hearing them in the interviews in the Bloody 100th, that's just how they are, man. And the one that got me the most, that I thought was just so cool, the character Rosie in the series like really grew on me here in the second half and became one of my favorite characters. Hearing his interviews in the documentary of the real Rosie,
yeah,
dude, nailed him in the way that that the real Rosie would talk so poetically about the planes. And
they open like the first thing the actual Rosie says is like, this is what caught me off guard. So it's like, it sounds, you know, it's like the show, like it's that he's that caricature, like that is him, because he's talking about like how like all of a sudden I just hear this voice and they're showing the B-17 and it's this person just talking about how beautiful this machine is. And I'm like, and then it's like they show him and it's Rosie. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Any of the people interviewed in the documentary, man, I wish I could just like have a conversation with some of these people and just hear the stories they have to tell. To sit down with any of these pilots, or really anyone that was active in World War II, man, what a conversation. The trials, the horrors that they went through, how time was back then. It would just be so fascinating to just sit and listen.
I mean, Rosie's like touched by God, like that he's like, he's both like prolific, you know, in his head, very self-aware, like, you know, if he's anything like the character that we saw on the show. But then also, you know, he gets his 25. They changed the rule to be like 30 or whatever. He's like, I'll do more. Like, what am I going to do? Go home and just like nap? 52 missions by the end of it. But yeah, but then, I mean, even after that, you know, there's still more to do, right? And he like goes to Nuremberg and like helps try the Nazis. Like, and then like meets the love of his life and gets married within like 2-3 weeks at Nuremberg and all of that. This dude was just in his pocket.
Yeah,
like he's coming off a high and he just wrote it hard in the paint. Like he knew, like he was self-aware enough to know, like, holy crap, like I'm just riding this. This is good.
So Nate Mann played him in the show and he did a phenomenal job. Rosie was, I mean, obviously Clevens and Egan, great characters, phenomenally acted. Really, they obviously make the show. But Rosie, right there at a close third in terms of characters.
He was also this light in the darkness when the Buckies went MIA, right? And they became POWs. I mean, obviously they showed it in the show a little bit, but it seems like in real life they went down like at the same time on the same mission. Whereas in the show they didn't.
Can't lose both your main characters in the middle of the season.
Right, they gotta build that tension there. Like, is Bucky dead?
I remember in the documentary, it kind of did play out like it did in the show, because Buck, or I always forget which one's which. Egan, I believe.
Egan's Buck.
Okay, no. Egan is Bucky. Cleven is Buck. Okay, so
Yeah.
Bucky was on leave in London, just like he was in the show, when he heard about Buck being shot down. And according to the interviewees in the documentary, he, you know, the next mission, he's like, I'm going, I'm leading. So, which sound like they're made for movies, that they're just made up stories, but that's actually what happened, which is kind of crazy.
I think there's some like math to that, like some statistics driven there, because so many people died, and the ones that made it out, they're the ones that are going to make it out with like some next level stories. It's just such an intense war, and like so many people are just dying. It was not for the faint of heart. It's not for the normal everyday person we might have these days. Like the ones that made it all the way through to the end, it makes sense why I think their stories they're all movie worthy.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, you talk about, like, not made for the normal person, but according to the documentary, like all these pilots were just like normal schmucks. They're like, hey,
They were.
America needs you. Come
Yeah.
learn how to fly planes. And like they were pulling just random dudes who are like, yeah, I need to go and serve and help my country. Can Tom Hanks like make a bad World War II thing?
You know, I want to watch that ship one where he's like the captain of this ship hunting
Oh
U-boats.
yeah, I think it's, what is it, like Greyhound or something?
Greyhound. So like that one looks like that would totally be like a B shelf movie if it wasn't for the fact that it has Tom Hanks at the helm. So it's like I want to watch that and be like, all right, is this a B movie or is it actually just freaking awesome?
Mhm.
That's gonna be the test. We'll see if Greyhound is good, right?
Yeah.
Tom Hanks can keep that.
Any moments in particular in the final 4 episodes that really stood out to you?
Well, once they found Bucky, Buck. Once they found Butler's Buck. That was a relief when Egan saw him through the fence at the camp.
Yeah.
The show's saved again. I was like, we can't kill him. That was a really good moment. I liked a lot of the Stalag scenes because The Great Escape was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Like me and my dad would watch that just because like it is regarded as a very good movie. It has some pretty A-list actors in it and it's just a good story. They were basically in that same camp, I believe. Like it was all the shared same thing. The Great Escape happened before all of this happened in the show, but that's why the Nazis were so tough on them. Before the Great Escape, everything was kind of kosher between the POWs and the Nazi guards and stuff. Like everything was pretty fine. But then once the Great Escape happened, that kind of pissed off the
Now,
Nazis.
I'm not familiar with that movie. Does that cover the British tunneling escape attempt?
Yeah, so it's the actual like tunneling escape attempt that they make out of the
Oh, no
Stalag 3.
way.
I think it's the exact same POW camp. Great premise, but like probably if knowing how bad it would become for the rest of the POWs like down the road,
Mhm.
probably wasn't worth it. But it's a nice oorah story to
Yeah.
to get the troops riled up.
The things that were happening to people then are just impossible to imagine that was actually real life. Hitler is he's never glorified in media, right? But he has a lot of media around him. He is the villain's villain, the most evil person to probably have ever existed.
In fiction. Nonfiction, I think there's a lot of content that paints him as an as-is figure, which people take with that what they will. There's a lot of like just face value stuff out there, but even that stuff, like it still paints him in a bad light because the dude was kind of a little bit bad, or a lot of bit bad, depending on how you want
Nick,
to scale that.
March 20th,
Yeah,
2024, Hitler. He was a little bit bad.
a little bit bad to a lot of bit bad.
Man, it's wild that we have so much media and content like focus. I mean, it's not wild because this was one of the largest moments in world history, right? But a line that was said in the documentary by one of the veterans keeps replaying through my mind, and it's that generation deserves to be remembered.
So they ended it. That
And
was
then,
the sad guy.
yeah, and me finally realizing that it is, in fact, 2024, and there probably is not anyone left from that era, right? They do need to be like their legacy needs to be cemented and like needs to live on and be remembered because there's a lot of valuable lessons to learn from that entire ordeal, and it's just cool that that can happen and also be mega entertaining too.
It's also a little bit of a detriment that so much like World War II stuff, things are so kind of black and white about
Mhm.
it because Nazis completely bad, right? But like you need to peel back the layers there and like understand Nazi dumb, if that's a thing, to like understand how that even came about. Because you still have parts of the shows, and I always like shows that touch on this a little bit. It was Egan. When he crashed, right? He was still turned in by just locals, just normal Germans, right? There's an entire population of people, and it's been studied so extensively and still isn't completely understood as to like how was one person such as Hitler able to like do all of this, right? It's just so incredible. So it's like, yeah, it's very entertaining just to be like, yeah, Nazis bad, haha, fun. But it really wasn't haha fun because it was a very like real thing that somehow happened in the
Mhm.
world, right? That we can't even fathom happening today. But like, could it happen again? Will it happen again? That's why I think it is important for one, there to be good media such as this on it, right? But then also for people to take it a little bit more seriously.
I could not even imagine something of this scale happening today. Just the scale of World War II. is so wild. There were so many people involved, and it spanned like such a huge area.
Yeah,
And like
everything, the world.
just watching the documentary of the footage of bombs actually dropping and like going through the wreckage, it's like that whole like continent was just destroyed.
Think of how long the British, like, we didn't even start the war, right? For several years. And the British had just been night carpet bombing, just whatever. So, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a war torn Europe, end to end, side to side. St. Petersburg, all that. And then obviously France, Western France was mostly okay. But yeah, just that whole middle part of Europe, just like decimated. The Russians were doing like the really bad thing. Hitler was basically doing like a near genocide against the Russians when he invaded Russia. So they just turned around and were like, well, guess what? We're marching the other way now. We're just going to wipe everything out. So allies in the West were being a little bit lighter on the ground than the Russians. Like they showed it when Rosie went down. Like they were just mowing everything down. They didn't care. They were so fed up with the situation.
And the fact that like, man, again, that dialogue is what he said.
That's my credentials. Like I know a bunch of like
Yeah.
American things. Believe me. He's like, yeah, if we just I just need to take this a little further and we get onto the Russian lines. That's our best bet for survival.
It was really cool to see the incorporation of the Tuskegee too. That was awesome. Getting the P-51 Mustang was really cool. Seeing that plane in action in the show was quite rad.
I wish there was more of that. And
Yeah.
that's like my one like gripe against the show because, you know, for the whole first half, we're like, all right, even in the graphic here, like there's like 7 people on here, 3 of them are black, and it's like, where are they in the show? Like they don't show up till like episode 6 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we get into it finally, like 7 or 8, and they're doing like this really cool like fighter bomber stuff in like Italy, and I'm like, those things are sweet. I want to see more of like P-51 stuff. And I feel like
No.
that was a little
And
under.
they're like, you know what, Nick, you like that? I'm gonna shoot them all down, and they're going to the war camp.
Yeah, like they're just gonna join up there, and like it's an important part of the story. But I wish it was a little bit more evenly shown. Like I wish they would have been showing that the whole time, along with what was happening in North. They have this like North-South thing where it's like, here's what's happening with the African front in Africa, and then here's the bombing from England, and then these two stories are going to intertwine in the POW camp. But then I don't know. I just thought that was weird.
Before the P-51s came about, the fighters that they were using, their fuel tanks weren't large enough to allow them to continue on in the journey. So that's why the escort was always dropped basically by the time the show showed the mission. And what made the P-51s so great was their fuel capacity was much greater, so they were able to stay with the bombers for longer. I wish that we would have gotten more of that period of the bloody 100th, not the documentary, but the squadron itself, because the addition of the Mustangs really is what turned the tide in the fight for the skies, right? They were able to equally combat the German air forces to allow the bombers to go and just wreck shop.
In the lead up to D-Day, yeah, because obviously the B-17s were able to shoot down plenty, but you know, obviously you can't completely mow out the Nazi fighters. So yeah, when the P-51s were introduced in the leading up months or weeks before D-Day, right? That's when we were able to like just clear house and be like, we both have bombers and superior fighters, and the skies are just all blue.
Yeah, because they made a point in the documentary explaining that the Luftwaffe actually trained and experienced pilots, mirroring our basically like farmers and lawyers and stuff that we
get like 2 months of training. They're like,
Yeah.
all right, let's go.
We sent them to pilot school and then threw them in a bomber. So, you know, a skilled pilot and a nimble fighter. Yeah, sure. I'm sure some got shot down, but they were able to do their own handiwork to the squadrons. That's for sure. So being able to match that was quite nice.
In general, the Nazis, they really started to have war fatigue in the last like 2 years there, because they started off strong, really strong, like caught everyone off guard, just like clean shop for the first like 3 years. But when you're fighting on, you know, 360-degree front, it's exhausting. And I just feel like there was some degree where the soldiers know it, like they all know it. Like obviously there's plenty of propaganda telling you like everything's a-okay, but you know, that desperation I think was starting to kind of shine through. You know, Hitler's giving his routine speech and just being like, yeah, we got this in the bag, and it's like, bro, we clearly don't. Like there is some at some point, like like obviously it's you would get murdered for at all like defying any orders, but you know, I think a little bit of your passion for
Yeah.
winning kind of starts to dwindle.
It was really cool having the documentary confirm how the Germans were acting, particularly in the war camps
Yeah.
and the interactions with like the leadership and the prisoners of war and stuff. Because watching the show, you know, when they call in the soldiers into the interrogation room and they're going through like basically talking with the soldier as if they've known each other for 20 years, that the
It's
Germans know
crazy.
everything about the American soldiers or whatever soldier it is that they're interrogating. I chalk that up to, oh yeah, that's cool, like drama, like TV stuff. And then the documentary is like, no, the Germans had a lot of spies in America, and they actually literally knew everything about us.
Yep.
And so they would pull us in and tell us all about our lives, and it was wild and crazy. If my brain
Well,
has a hard time comprehending all this stuff actually happened.
yeah, and it's a little less talked about, but like at least up until the point where we weren't in the war, right before Pearl Harbor, there were Nazi rallies in America. There was totally people just like today that are in favor of the other guys. You know, that was the thing. Like there was a presence here. So I've watched and read some stuff where it's like almost like a flip of the coin to the point where it could come down to like politics and like economic reasons why we even sided the way we did. That's all hearsay. But
Wow.
it's not as like allies, here we go, hoorah. Like it was, I'm pretty sure it was after we decided that was the plan. But like before we were like, yeah, you know, we're staying out of it.
Let's kind of see how this plays out
Let's
for a
see how it
little
plays
bit.
out. I mean, it was like 3 years though. Like it started in 39 when they invaded Poland, I believe. We didn't join until like 44. Like
Mm,
that's a long, like think about that too. Like that's a long time for a basically a war minus us to be going on.
yeah.
And we're just
We're
like,
just kicking back
eh.
like, wow, that would suck, bro.
Like your friend from the next neighborhood down be like, my entire town's burning down. It's like, ah man, that's rough.
Yeah.
I I'm kind of cool here.
Hope that clears up for you guys.
Yeah. But also like in the timelines are so weird, and like that's I think where people rush through like what's happening. Obviously they do that for stories and stuff.
Mhm.
They did do a little bit of a good job when they were in the POW camp, like as they were tracking like their progress toward Germany. Like that was months from D-Day to even getting to Germany. What was going on? Like tons of fighting, tons of activity. It wasn't just like we landed in D-Day and then 2 weeks later the war was over. It's just so much happening
Yeah.
everywhere all the time. And it's hard to like wrap your brain around.
A few things. One, I'm both simultaneously deeply saddened, but also very happy that they glossed over D-Day.
Yeah, it was appropriate. Well, we slept through it with what's his name? Like, you know, we kind of took a nap for it. Like we basically from his
Oh yeah,
perspective.
Crosby. Yeah,
Yeah,
that oh
his
man, that
perspective.
was such a brilliant like way to handle that.
Yeah.
So cool. Dude's like popping pills, staying awake for 72 hours, trying to plan out D-Day from the air, and passes out. And how long was he asleep for?
3 days.
Th- So he didn't sleep for 3 days and then slept for 3 days, missed D-Day in its entirety, as did we, which actually turned out pretty cool.
The
Because,
most
I mean,
D-Day we saw was in the opening credits when when we get that one scene of them flying over the beach, which was all I needed. Like
yeah,
between that and like there's three things in the opening credits why I watched them. It was the beach like flying over. I'm like, I know I'm only gonna get to see that scene. I know they're not doing any more than that, so I'm gonna watch it
yeah.
as often as I can. Egan with his head on the flagpole,
No, yeah,
glorious moment. And
beautiful.
obviously our boy Butler just kind of like looking up in his cockpit of his plane, just like with the sun sign on his face. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
all of it right there.
I believe if you look closely when they're flying over the beach, spelled out with the boats, it just there's like an asterisk and then it says "Watch Saving Private Ryan," and then it continues on to the next scene. Um,
I've been to Omaha Beach.
oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty rowdy.
Yeah, clean up much since then.
Oh, it's much cleaner. Lots of cool stuff. Good, cool museum there.
Yeah.
Creepy, strange because like there's parts of the museum where you're walking through it and you're walking on glass because below the glass was basically a recreation of what the ground was like. So just bodies and just shrapnel and just war. So
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, this is pleasant. Like
Nice. Where'd they get the bodies from? For
they
the
were
display?
fake.
Oh.
Yeah, they're fake.
The smell was agonizing. What were you doing over there?
I did a European tour thing when I was like 13 or something. It's like an
Oh,
ambassador
nice.
program. I'm a cultured individual,
Wow, yeah, I'd say. Jeez.
representative of the United States, all that stuff.
I know you're serious, but I just can't take that seriously. That's awesome. Obviously there's been a lot of focus on D-Day, so I'm glad that this
Yeah.
show didn't focus on it, but also the invasion is very rowdy and makes for good TV. So I was a little sad where I was like, could we at least get something where they're like
Yeah,
dropping some bombs on stuff or some cool P-51
they didn't have
action?
to. They didn't have to though, because a lot of the work was already done. That's how I took it. It was like the point of the show is to show you all the work that went into the prep work for D-Day. Because we gotta get the skies clear, we gotta bomb some like key things to get them inoperable. So them just flying over, doing their kind of victory lap and like some cleanup missions. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and I totally forgot until this came up, but like Crosby during that whole thing, that part was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Crosby was a cool character, and
He was.
while I wasn't like a huge fan of like his little side arc with the British or Scottish
Oh, I
lady,
like that.
like what was she just like a
She's a
spy?
spy. Yeah.
And that
She's
kind of
kind
like tailed off into a big nothing burger.
I took that as it's basically the underground like spy slash like survivor network in France and even mostly France. When I think that was just like the British fueling that more. So look, we had spies there. They had spies over here. Is what
Yeah.
it is. Spy games.
But his character was really cool,
Oh
and
yeah.
the evolution of like where we met him being like the fumbling pukey navigator on the flights to
The
basically
man.
becoming like the brilliant strategist for the squadron, right? Planning out all their missions.
But like back to the idea of like these are just like normal people. I don't think like they might not have been necessarily brilliant, but like he put in the work to get it done. Like I think that's the other thing. Like a lot of this is just like elbow grease that
Mhm.
made so many of these people so awesome was because like they were just straight up putting in the work, right? They didn't buckle on mission 10, let alone, bomb run 20, 25. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
imagine that. Like that's why I just can't fathom Rosie. Like he got his 25, he could have left, but like he was like, I'll stay and I'll double
Yeah.
that number.
Yeah, and did you notice in the documentary the one guy who did say that he like
He
went
went.
home?
Yeah.
It almost sounded like he was mildly ashamed,
No, for sure. I think
but
yeah,
like he didn't have to be.
no, did not.
But
But I think
that's how those people were, which is so amazing.
yeah, and I think that's the hard thing because you had completely like you can't really say dedicated. Not that he wasn't dedicated, but like you can't say he wasn't selfless. Like he did his 25, but from his point of view, though, like here's Rosie doing 25 more plus trying Nazis at Nuremberg, like just going like the full distance,
Yeah.
but totally, yeah, you're right. Like did not have to feel that way. And I don't know if that's just like the projection of things. Like I think that's like a horrible mess of like he thinks people think that, people think that he thinks that people think that. Like and that's just like a mess of just like
It's the
feelings right there.
Spider-Man meme of like
Yeah, it's just
something
like
that doesn't actually exist.
but like everyone on paper is just like, it's okay, man.
Yeah,
Like no one blames you. Like
right,
I'm glad he said that because I'm like, I'm glad someone like went home. Like
right.
that's an achievement in itself.
I mean, one mission is enough in my book, right? Like the fact that you went over
At least
there,
two.
you flew, you did your job, and you survived. Like that takes a sack, and you survived 25. Like do not feel bad for going
Don't feel
home,
bad.
man. Not everyone can be a Rosie. Okay.
Did your gerb.
Are you a little sad that this is just a limited series and it's over now?
No, I think it was super appropriate because I think, and this kind of shown through in the middle when they were like transitioning the story a bit. I felt like if they stretched anything like too far, it would have been too much, and like it would have been boring. It would have not been good. At the end of the day, like they weren't embellishing anything, and they were just kind of sticking to the story. So outside of like the first season being straight up just like training, half of it like more of the like 2 month training maybe or something like that, the pre going over,
Mhm.
those are still great episodes. Like they're on their way over there, like flying through Greenland and all that crap. Like that was still great. So yeah, I mean, I think if they stretched anything out too far, it would have been too much. It could have maybe been a 2 seasoner and divided it up to where it's like just relentless bombing, and like the finale hanger would have been like the Bucks going down, and then you finish up the same way. Could have been two, but I think it's fine for what it was. Not you're not you're not lacking material out there if you're interested in learning more.
That's so true.
It's not like Dune where it's like now you have to go read the books. You can just go to any app I think these days and you can go to YouTube and just be like World War II. Good luck. Good luck. You will die before you watch everything.
So with that said, where do you rate this? What's your recommendation for our listeners out there?
Man, if you like World War II stuff, like you have to watch it. It's definitely like that great dramatized version of it, but like still telling the real story as much as they can. I wouldn't recommend it for your like, your daily driver, but I recommend everyone on Earth watch it just for like the World War II perspective kind of stuff. But it's gonna be probably boring and dry. A lot of people had issues with like the first half of the series. They're all masked the whole time and it's just flying chaos, but it's like I think that's awesome. But if you're looking for a lot of interpersonal drama and like a good show, like it's gonna be a miss for a lot of people, I think. What about you? You recommend it?
If you have Apple TV, like this is a must watch. It's fantastic, beautifully shot, beautifully acted. Didn't even really need written because the story it's based off of is just insane and based off of some larger than life people. But not only that, kind of like we talked about earlier, just being able to, see a little glimpse into our history in a way. I know it's like a dramatized reenactment of, following this squadron or whatever.
You got
But
to have them though, because you're either watching something like this or you're watching a documentary.
right.
And I can't recommend documentaries to anyone because I'm just like, I recommend it to
Yeah.
like 3 people that I know watch World War II documentaries.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because the documentary is not going to captivate everyone. But
Go grab my
this
wife.
this
Watch this.
show,
Watch this.
yeah,
This is
this show
important.
exactly. But this show is almost like a tracing of, the picture the
Yeah,
documentary paints, right? So it's always good to
in color.
be able to, remember the guy from the documentary said like this generation deserves to be remembered. This this period of time is just unfathomable that people had to go through this voluntarily, like did sign up to go through this. It's just wild. It's a must watch. It's a great show. It is great. Austin Butler is phenomenal. Callum Turner, amazing. Anthony Boyle, who plays Crosby, amazing. Nate Mann, who plays Rosie, amazing. And then you have like your random Barry Keoghan sighting.
Yeah.
His character lasted like 3 episodes, but was an awesome character. Yeah, great show. 85, 90%, 8.5, 9 out of 10. I'd say that's pretty solid in my eyes.
10 out of 10 would recommend. I loved it. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, as millennials, we're the greatest. That's just like how it is. Because we're both the last and the first into everything. That's just my biased perception. I want to hear some counter arguments, but we were like one of the last generations to actually know and like have grandparents that were the greatest generation, and our parents are pretty well educated about the subject because that was their parents. Whereas like our kids, like, they're never gonna actually know any of the greatest generation.
Yeah,
So it's like
their parents were the ones eating Tide Pods. What a what a shift.
so it's like, how do we, the last ones out the door on that ship, convey like the importance, like what that guy says, like they deserve to be remembered. How do we convey that, not just like the event itself and like the implications on the world, but like the people that were in it? Like, how do
Mhm.
we convey that importance to our children, their children?
Yeah.
Like, these stories. Like, obviously, good thing we have movies and media and all that stuff, and it can kind of live on through there. But like I was saying earlier, it does suck that when we do tell these stories, they're so black and white sometimes, and there's just so much more depth to everything
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, cool movie, but like now place this as a blanket over the actual world and be like, it wasn't just a little pocket of this story happening. Like it's literally
Mhm.
you have to like calibrate it for the entire planet and be like, okay, that was the Earth. It's like, how
Right.
do you do that? It's just so crazy.
Yeah, and like not to well, no, I am intentionally saying this, so I guess I am getting on the soapbox. But like,
So box.
you know, that kind of this whole conversation of, the purpose that these pieces of media serve in remembering like this generation, this atrocious period of time, this massive global war. Preserving history and remembering what happened is vitally important. As well, what's the old saying? Like, we're not doomed to repeat it, right? And that's kind of the troubling thing of what's kind of been going on in America like the last handful of years. If we took the same approach, let's say, of how we tore down all these monuments and statues of past leaders in America in the South, right? Because they were slave owners and Confederates and yeah, all that stuff's terrible. But if we scrubbed, the world of Hitler,
Can't,
like,
don't.
remembering these heinous acts are so important so we can like identify and like be like, oh, maybe we're starting to head in that direction again. Remember what happened last time? Let's not do that.
The other way I look at it too, though, which is unfortunate, is that, and this is also again like it. Sometimes it's not understood enough. Like it isn't enough just to know that Nazis bad, allies good, right? Like that's not enough because then you have people that just kind of generally pass. Um, they reuse these terms for things that like greatly do not apply. Like it is quite the claim, I think, to allude anyone to being an Eisenhower or like a Hitler or a Churchill. Like these are huge people that were
Mhm.
very impactful in the world. So you can't just like cast these statements on like things today without like really thinking about like, is that the equivalent? Like, is that the right analogy you want to be drawing? Because
Right.
it's a pretty serious thing to try to like draw that. So like, if you're going to point out the next Hitler in the world, probably want to make sure that's the right one. Call
Yeah.
that correctly.
And you can't do that if you scrub Hitler from the history books in existence. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know.
Hitler
It's
Hitler
crazy.
just isn't a blanket statement for everything bad.
Right. Right.
He was a whole lot of bad, but like bad's a very broad spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
There was some parts of the show where they were kind of, a lot of the train scenes are always just so hard to watch because it's like they didn't even like touch on like the Holocaust. Like they were just talking about how the Germans were just trooping people around and just like putting them places. Like that in itself
Yeah.
was horrific. Outside of the
Well,
Holocaust, like they're just packing people in trains and like shipping them to camps. Like even that stage of it is just like,
yeah. What was the camp that Rosie stumbled on with his Rusky comrades?
yeah, that was in Poland, I do believe. It definitely was a camp where they were just straight up killing people in droves. That's what the Russians were finding on that side because that's where all that was. Because that's a lot of that wasn't in France. A lot of that was happening Poland because that's where they'd been the longest. So they kind of that
Mhm.
was deep, deep Nazism. So like it's almost like a very, very fog of war. Like no one could see that deep into the blanket of fog. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
where they started uncovering all of that.
With that being said, I want to end on a slightly positive note
Nope.
before we get out of here. And
Nope.
it's something I posted in Discord earlier today. Shout out if you're not in our Discord, you should be because for some reason we don't understand how to use social media. So most of our interaction and conversations with our lovely audience happens in our Discord.
Dad's fault.
But man, Apple has some bangers, dude. There's so much stuff out right now on Apple from like 3 years ago when I first, set my eyes on Apple, and they only
When
had like
season 1 of everything came out,
Yeah. Oh man. Like when I was in on Invasion and Foundation, but even before that, when really the only show being billed for Apple Plus was like that C show with Jason Momoa.
I want to watch that. I saw like that
That's like
somewhere.
that's like the OG Apple show.
Okay.
To where we are now, there is so much good stuff on Apple Plus that I want to watch. Napoleon's available now, so I got to watch
Watched
that. Was it sweet?
It's worth a 0.8% or 80% watch. Like just watch 80% of it.
Okay.
It's not that good.
Oh, interesting.
It's not that
Interesting.
good.
Well, so you just killed my whole segment, Nick.
Yep. But that isn't like an Apple that's a movie that Apple TV
Yeah.
has exclusive streaming access to.
But Masters of the Air, obviously, we've done 2 episodes on it. Phenomenal show. Constellation just started a couple of weeks ago. Dad is all in on it. I watched the first maybe 3 episodes. It's okay. It's interesting. It's weird. It's strange. It has that almost like Severance type pull to it, and its uniqueness and oddities. You're all in on For Mankind. Again, not a new show, but
Dude, that okay. We've been watching. I feel like I've been watching like basically I'm knocking out like the staple, like the ones that have been there staples. So like we're caught up on the morning show that has 3 seasons. There's a 4th one coming. We started Ted Lasso. There's like 4 seasons.
Great
of that,
show.
whatever. Fantastic show. Absolutely amazing. My wife laughs at it, which is a challenge. Not just anything makes her laugh. Truly. But then like I thought earlier this week, I thought I was caught up with For All Mankind when I finished season 3. And then like I saw some articles or like as I was getting toward the end, it was like everything we know about season 5. I'm like, pause. What? You know, like
where's this seasons? Unknown 4th season?
Oh my god. But yeah, all in on that show.
Manhunt just came out, I believe, and that looks amazing. Lincoln assassination, the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, like looks so cool. Of course, Monarch Legacy of Monsters was amazing. Speaking of, new Godzilla coming soon. Kind of excited for that, except for they made this weird like Fast and Furious comparison. And then that made me a little sad about it.
Wait, who did?
I'll find the article. But yeah, and then of course, you know, you still have Invasion Foundation seasons 2, Severance season 2 coming. There's so much good stuff on Apple Plus. If you do not have this service yet, you should. Apple TV is amazing, and you should definitely try it out. Well, didn't you do like a free trial with PlayStation or something?
PlayStation 5 gives you 3 free months.
Dang, dude. Well, there you go. Just go buy a PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously cheaper than just signing up for Apple Plus.
Now, no, I'm going to keep it. Unfortunately, Apple TVs, just like their devices, they're incredibly predictable that they're going to work and they're going to be good. Somehow they've cracked that code. They have drawn a lot of very quality content to their platform. And it's just great because I think I said this on another episode where it's like somehow they've found the correct pocket of the new like primetime television series. Like these are the shows that I feel like should be on like cable TV, like NBC, ABC, all that. Like that, like those things should have evolved into this, but they haven't. They suck. Like this is what those shows should have evolved in instead of devolving or being the same for the past like 20 years. Like that's like what all NBC shows, ABC, CBS, like they have been the same for like the only difference is now they're in like HD 4K and they look like crap because like
Does CBS actually have any shows besides like 20 different versions of NCIS?
I don't think so. No.
At this point, they're aiming for like each state to have its own.
Oh, they have all the they have the firefighter ones and the NCIS.
CBS, it's just for all first responders.
Yeah.
Like
cops, firefighters, some detective units.
Yeah, I think don't they even have like
Coast Guard?
A prisoner serving on a firefighting team to work off his prison sentence type show. I don't know. I saw a lot of awful looking, commercials for shows during football season. I'll just say that. Like CBS, come on, just
like the only things that have a chance that are the ones that are ancillary to like FX and like those next tier associated TV shows or like Hulu adjacent kind of things.
Mhm.
FX, what's the other one? AMC, right? They got to be like
AMC,
a ancillary.
USA,
Yeah, right.
sometimes.
That's the
Yeah.
only way they have a chance. Otherwise, like,
Yeah.
eh.
You're just doomed for another NCIS spinoff.
20 seasons though, going strong.
Oh my gosh, I don't understand
They
how people
must
watch
make
that.
them money. I don't know. Like, or
Yeah.
they just need to fill the time.
Yeah, I don't
They'd be
get
better
it.
off just putting like some Apple TV, shows in the slots. Just buy
Dude.
them out. Just buy some rights to them.
Yeah, that'd be
Might be
amazing.
cheaper. Not to tell them how to run their business. That's not what we do around here. But hey,
Yes. But yeah, hey, I think the Austin Butler train will continue though, because I believe next week we may or may not be talking about Dune Part 2 and
that's at least 45 minutes of talking about Austin Butler. So
Fade
I'm ready to
Rafa.
go.
Yes. Oh man, I'm so excited to talk about it. But hey, this is a Master of the Air episode, so make sure you guys leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about this series as a whole, the Bloody 100th documentary. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment here on the video and let us know. And if you enjoyed what we got into tonight, make sure you subscribe here, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
I guess. Where's Dad? Dad, were you trying to talk into your mic? Like I saw you tap and like say something as if you were talking to us.
Yeah. I was talking to you guys.
He's just like
I'm totally not doing anything else right now.
he's playing Helldivers.
What? No way.
Mad Dadness.